Burlington Mayor Marianne Meed Ward joins us this morning with a developing story about development. Story this morning in the Toronto Star about the province putting, why don't I let you explain it?
So the province introduced Bill 23, which limits our ability to collect development charges, which pays for housing enabling infrastructure, things like water and sewers that you need if you're going to have a house. You need these things. And then they said, we'll introduce the Building Faster Fund, $1.2 billion, but you have to meet certain targets for your housing pledge. But what they count as meeting targets is a foundation poured. So we don't control that at the municipality. What we control is the approvals that we've given. And so most of our members at the Ontario Big City Mayors Caucus, and certainly Burlington, we won't qualify for any of this funding, which means we have to do one of two things. Either raise taxes to build the infrastructure to get the housing, or not build the infrastructure and not get the housing. So it is completely against what the government is trying to achieve, and it doesn't help us.
Because you're kind of like set up to fail. You can't build a house if there's no water infrastructure, if there's no roads going there.
Absolutely. And what they're counting is, again, foundations poured, but that is the development industry that determines whether they actually pull a permit, get shovel in the ground, and pour a foundation. And what we're hearing from developers right now, all across Ontario, is that with high interest rates, difficult for them to qualify for loans, difficult for people to get mortgages, so sales have really gone down, labor shortages, supply chain issues, rising costs of construction. So a number of developers have put projects on hold, so they're not pulling those permits, they're not building those foundations. And so we're in this perfect storm of we need the infrastructure to build the housing, but they're counting foundations poured, which is well along the path. They're not going to pour a foundation until the infrastructure is built. So we have said to the provincial government, look, we'll help you and work with you to build a better metric that we can be judged by, but this isn't it, because we don't control that.
And you've been saying that for a long time.
We've been saying that for a month since this was introduced. We've also said that while the $1.2 billion fund is welcome, it is nowhere near what is needed. Association of Municipalities of Ontario has estimated the infrastructure costs are roughly in the order of $3 to $4 billion. So we also have said to the government, look, you said you were going to keep us whole when you introduced Bill 23 and limited our ability to collect development charges to pay for these things. Be good to your word. You know, we haven't heard any details of what keeping us whole will look like.
And you're one of 50 municipalities in Ontario.
The Ontario's Big City Mayors is 29, but the government, the 29 largest municipalities over 100,000, that represents 70% of Ontario's population. But the government did roll it out to some smaller municipalities. So it's closer to 50 now that have agreed to housing pledges. You have to agree to your housing pledge to get access to the fund. So Burlington's case is 29,000 units. We have over 40,000 units in our development pipeline right now. We have over 7,000 that are under review, and we have close to 4,000 that are just waiting for developers to come in and get their permits. Again, we don't control that. So we have no worries that we'll meet our targets over time, but the economy is not helping, and factors outside our control and outside the development industry's control are limiting that ability.
So you can't get cash from the province?
We are not eligible for any cash for the province right now. So we can't build the infrastructure, we can't, the developers aren't going to build the housing until the infrastructure is there. It's, it's really not an appropriate metric, and that's what we've conveyed to the government. And we'll help them come up with one. We're happy to be held to an account. We're happy to have a transparent and understandable target that actually relates to what we control, but foundations isn't it.
Right. And stuck in this is all the people who don't have housing.
Absolutely. And that's the biggest tragedy of this whole situation, is that we as municipalities are all saying we are there to help. We will issue permits. We will do everything we can to make sure that developers have their approvals. Developers want to get shovel in the ground, although they're challenged by the economy. We all want to do this, but the way that the government has set up the funding and the definitions goes completely against that. It's counterintuitive, and it really cuts us off at the knees.
Okay. Lots more on this story coming up all day long, I'm sure. We've got about 30 seconds left. I wanted to mention what Burlington is doing for Remembrance Day.
We have two events that we always enjoy. The first is the sunrise service down at our Naval Memorial at Spencer Smith Park. That starts at 9, followed of course by our Remembrance Day parade and ceremony at Veterans Square, right beside City Hall at 11.
Okay. Marianne Meed Ward, Mayor of Burlington. We're going to hear a lot more from you today on this developing story about development. Okay, we'll be back with more Morning Live right after this.